Good day and welcome to Drew's Book Reviews. So, many years ago, I picked up this book. It had these dogs on the front. It kind of looked like this really kind of dark fantasy look to it. And I just couldn't get into it. I didn't understand what was going on. The story was confusing. I didn't know where we were, what was happening. And so I just kind of gave up and didn't finish that book. It wasn't until many years later that I realized it was actually part of a bigger epic series. What I'd ended up doing, inadvertently and unknown to me, was pick up a book that was like halfway through the series. So that was probably why I couldn't get into it. Then along comes Mike's book review, and he decides to do a relong on Malazan, Book of the Fallen. And now I'm getting into this series. So today's book review is going to be about the first book in this series of Malazan, Book of the Fallen, Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erickson. So if you're interested, stay tuned. That is coming right up. Okay, so Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erickson, the first book in Malazan, Book of the Fallen. So first, let's talk a little bit about the world in which this takes place. So it takes place on the continent of Genebacus, and the basic overall idea behind this book is you have the Malazan Empire who is determined to conquer the world. And there's one holdout left, there's one city, Darujistan, left, and they are the last soul standing survivors. They are the ones that are standing up against the Empire, and they do not wish to have the Emperor come in and take them over like they have the rest of the world, essentially. And of course, the Empire's not happy with this. And so that is basically the idea. The Empire is going in, trying to conquer the last of the free cities of Darujistan. It opens up with this invasion and destruction of the city of Pale, which is kind of where our opening scenes are set within this book. Think about the destruction of Pale that was just crazy in my opinion, and just the description of the death and destruction that we find within this book, and the scenes of the aftermath of the bloody confrontation with the death and the bodies, and the description of the destruction and the positions of the bodies, the appearance of the dead around you, and just sends shivers down my spine. Just awesome in the way it's described, and it really drew me into this story, and just it was so visceral and so well described, and it really set the tone for the book, and it really set the feel, the eeriness of what was going on, and I absolutely loved that aspect of it. So it really kind of throws you right into it right from the start, and opens up with that destruction and that terror and everything that just kind of gone. And that is really your opening scene. It really helps set the tone for this book and sets the feel going in to this story. And for me, at least, it really drew me in right away into the overall plot and ideas behind this story. So of course, within this story, we've got many different characters that we are working with, and many different points of view that actually do shift and change and go back and forth a lot in this book. But they're definitely there, and for some people it has been kind of confusing. Some people have talked about how it was difficult to follow for them. I'm not sure I found it difficult to follow so much, but there was definitely a lot of shifting of ideas, shifting of viewpoints and perspectives between the different characters that sometimes is like, whoa, wait, what's going on here? But my understanding is that it gets better throughout the rest of the series, is that as we read through the series, we definitely start to get a better idea. We're able to follow things a little bit better. So I'm definitely looking forward to continuing on with this read along on Mike's book review for this. So just some of the characters involved here. One of the most interesting characters, personally, I think, within this book is the character of Sori. That's actually her name, Sori. She's an interesting character to me because she has essentially been possessed by a god. And she is basically engaging in activities and actions and behavior that are outside of her control. And she doesn't even really realize or know that she's possessed. And this makes for a really interesting character dynamic, because there are those who are after Sori, who want to basically get rid of her and destroy her, because they know what she's really about. They know she is not who they think she is. And Sori doesn't even know that she's not who she thinks she is. She's kind of this new recruit that comes into the army, essentially, and she's kind of infiltrating everything. And then that's what really makes her character interesting, this possession, because when the gods get involved, things go to hell, so to speak. And it just makes for a really interesting story, and I really kind of liked her character within this. I think she might be the most interesting character for me. Just the idea of her being possessed by a god and not really understanding or knowing that, and just kind of doing the will of this god, essentially. So she's a really interesting character that I enjoyed kind of reading about, and you know, I hope to see more of Sori in upcoming books, kind of see where that goes. Now, we do know she doesn't remain possessed the entire story, but definitely an interesting character aspect for me with respect to Sori. So Tattersale was the commanding sorceress of the Second Army's mages cadre, which unfortunately didn't survive, but she was the commanding officer of this army's cabal or cadre of mages. So that was kind of her role in the empire, as far as her position of authority within the Malazan Empire's military arm. So Tattersale was at the siege of Pale, where basically she was the lone mage survivor of that devastating battle. And she was basically on the attack, while of course Pale was on the defensive. With our other character, the Lord of Moon's spawn, Anamander Rake, was there. Pale was effectively destroyed. The mages were killed across the board, and there are virtually no survivors. Tattersale was one of the survivors of this horrendous battle that took place at Pale and destroyed the city, which we read about in kind of the opening bit of the book. And so, you know, that was pretty devastating for her, of course. Pale was, of course, an Anamander Rake, the Lord of Moon spawn, the last holdout against the Empire. He was helping protect and defend the city, but the siege came and the destruction was there, and she being the lone survivor of that horrendous battle. One of the wizards involved at this battle of Pale, he basically moved himself or transferred his soul, his embodiment, his being, into this kind of wooden puppet. So his name is Hairlock, and he put himself in this puppet, in which Tattersale was then entrusted with protecting this puppet's body and keeping him safe, because, you know, people are after them, obviously. But that's not all. This is kind of where we get introduced to some other aspects of this story, ones that I personally loved. The idea of these dark hounds, which are basically these shadow hounds. They are the tools of the gods. Gods kind of with a very dark overtone and dark ideology behind it. I really love that aspect of these dark hounds that are in there, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more dark hounds and these kind of things coming up later on in other books. So it's kind of a brief idea of who Tattersale is within this book. I'm trying not to get into spoilers, so I don't really want to talk too much about what they do throughout the book, but just kind of a brief, this is who Tattersale is. And then, of course, we also have Whiskey Jack. Whiskey Jack is the commander of the Bridge Burners, which is kind of this military unit of the Empire. So he's in charge of the Bridge Burners, and along with Tattersale and Hairlock and everyone else, they all end up going to Darushistan, which is the last holdout city within this world. And we also got, of course, one other character, Captain Piran. He also is in charge of the Bridge Burners. Basically, he takes over the Bridge Burners from Whiskey Jack, and he is commanded by order of the adjunct of the Empire to take this over. And of course, all these characters meet up at Darushistan, where everything kind of comes to a head and the whole world goes crazy at Darushistan. There's all kinds of plots on either side. Of course, there's Anamander Rake there. There's a plot to raise this dead tyrant king from the grave in order to force Anamander Rake to defend his city and drain his resources so that the Empire can move in. And there's just all kinds of things going on with that. and all these different side plots, these different stories, so I could really understand why some people found it to be a bit confusing while reading this book. It's completely understandable in many ways because of just how many viewpoints are shifting back and forth all the time. I gotta be honest, I enjoyed it. I felt like I could follow the story reasonably well, but I'm still not completely clear on who's what, when, and where in some aspects. But I'm confident that those things will come into more perspective and clarity as we continue to read through the series. Overall, I found that this book really was a setup for the rest of the series. So it's really kind of establishing the world and establishing the characters and establishing where we're going with this whole story in the long run. Now, the magic system, this is something of interest. This really kind of has more of a soft magic system. There's a lot of talk of wizards and sorcery and mages, but it's just that they have magic. Nothing's really explained about what their magic is. Now, I've heard some other booktubers say that this book is set up like a D&D or Dungeons and Dragons campaign with the mages and wizards and sorcery and dragons and that kind of thing. And I can kind of see where they're coming from now. I've never actually played Dungeons and Dragons, but I do understand where they're getting that kind of feel within the magic system in this world, which is just kind of there. These wizards and sorcerers, they reach into their warren to pull out their magical strength, and it's kind of referred to as the warren. And there's also this aspect of card reading and tarot card reading, essentially, where you read a deck of cards to determine what's going to happen and gather and gain information. So the magic system is kind of that soft magic system. Now, preferably, I like hard magic systems. I like systems where there are rules and how things work and how you have to tap into that. And instead of just, hey, it's magic. Not that there's anything wrong with soft magic systems. I mean, that's totally fine. I do enjoy both. I just like the hard magic system better personally. I find that to be more interesting and more entertaining. But I kind of really like to get into the nitty-gritty how things work. So that's kind of why I like that hard magic system a little bit better. There ain't nothing wrong with that, that's for sure. But overall, yeah, that's the gist of it and how the magic system within this world works. Now, there was one little other aspect of this book that for me just didn't really have that great of a payoff in the end. And I will just say right now, spoiler warning, this might be a slight or mild spoiler for the book, so if you haven't read it or haven't got to the part about the resurrected dead Tyrant King yet, don't watch any further or pause it, go read it, come back, finish watching later, whatever you need to do. But in any case, there's this large build-up to this plot to resurrect this old Jaghut tyrant who is supposed to be this absolutely terrible, villainous, evil, horrible thing that is supposed to wreak havoc and virtually destroy or, severely weaken Anamanda Rake. And there's this plot where this Tyrant King is resurrected from the dead to come into the world and wreak havoc. So I felt that there was a lot of build-up to just how big a threat this was supposed to be, but very little payoff. It just felt too easy to kill off and get rid of this Tyrant King. It's like from the resurrection to the kill-off was such a small part of the book itself, and I really didn't feel that the build-up and the payoff were worthwhile in that. And it just didn't work for me. I'm hoping that maybe the Tyrant King isn't as dead as we maybe thought that he was or should be. And maybe with any luck, just maybe, he'll show up in other books. I don't know, I've never read this series. It's my first time through it. But at the end of the day, I really didn't feel that that had much of a payoff for the build-up that was presented with that in the end. So that's kind of where I'm sitting with that. And maybe somebody else feels different, I don't know, but for me it just didn't work all that well. Overall, I would have to say that I would probably give this particular book a 3 out of 5 on Goodreads. So, I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it was fantastic, but it definitely isn't terrible. It was a good overall read. 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. And at the end of the day, I definitely enjoyed it, and I'm going to enjoy the rest of the series. And I really am looking forward to reading all the other books within Malazan, Book of the Fallen, because that'll just be fun all around. So there's just some of my thoughts on Gardens of the Moon, and yeah, we'll see how the rest of the series goes. told it only gets better from here. I've heard that this is the worst of the books. Now, if this is the worst of the series, then I am in for a real treat and a real ride with the rest of them. So I'm certainly looking forward to that. And there you have it. There are my thoughts on Gardens of the Moon. So make sure that you do stay tuned. I am currently reading The Elegant Universe, so that'll be the book that is coming up next on my TBR, or for my next review. So stay tuned for my thoughts on The Elegant Universe by Brian Greene. So that is coming up next. And you know, as always, like, comment, subscribe. If you like this video, tell me what you thought. Have you read Gardens of the Moon? And let me know what you thought down below. And as always, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, where I am most active. I do have a Patreon as well if you want to support this channel. As little as $1.50 Canadian per month, or $1 American per month. You can support this channel if you care to do so, no obligation. But hey, if you want to, it's there. I appreciate any and all support, including views, likes, and comments, as always. And of course, I also have a Discord, so that will be linked below if you want to jump in the Discord and chat with me there as well. Looking forward to it. So thank you so much for watching. And until next time, keep on reading. Bye.